We're going to make three sauces for the mini cheesecakes, and the first one is going to be the wild blueberry sauce. Now these are frozen wild blueberries. I have washed them and then put them back in the freezer, so they're kind of chunky and stuck together, but that really doesn't matter. You don't need to drain them for this, as you do in some baking recipes where you might want to let some of the juice drain out of them. I've put a paper towel in the bottom of the container to absorb some of the excess water. Okay, so that's the wild blueberries, product of PEI. And we're now going to figure out there's the switch for this burner. And I'm adding half a cup of granulated sugar, which is just plain old white sugar. And we will add the juice of half of a lemon. I've just put that colander in the saucepan to catch some of these seeds because the lemons are so seedy. There. Don't need that anymore. And a lot of liquid will come out of the blueberries as they cook, so you don't need to add any extra water or anything. Some recipes for sauce, if you wanted a little orangey, you can, if you want to, add just a splash of orange juice. But I think the lemon flavor really works well with the blueberries. So we're going to let this come to a boil. It just takes a little longer when you're using frozen berries. But when it comes to a boil, we're going to add what's called a slurry of cornstarch and water. And a slurry is just a mixture, a suspension of cornstarch and water, because the starch won't actually dissolve in the water, but it will cook up to make a nice clear sauce when it's heated. And our blueberries are coming to a boil now. They've softened up. And I'm going to just stir this slurry in. It goes in white and it soon clarifies to become clear. It doesn't need to much more than come to a boil. You have to be careful when you're working with blueberries, of course, especially when you have a white shirt on, because a splash is going to require immediate attention. They certainly stain. They're very good dyes. That's coming along now. It's another few seconds and be able to put it in the dish and let it cool a little. I think when you're serving with cheesecakes, it's good to have the sauces chilled or at least cooled to room temperature. To put a hot sauce on a cold cheesecake might kind of ruin the texture of the cheesecake. I'm going to pour this into this bowl to chill. It will thicken up a little as it cools, but you don't want it really thick and stodgy anyway. There we go, and that's the blueberry sauce to go with our mini cheesecakes. And you know what else it's good with? It's really good with plain yogurt, layered to make a parfait. And it's got so many uses. You can put it on ice cream too. So think about this simple blueberry sauce with only a few ingredients, and it takes about 10 minutes to make. Caramelized apples make a great topping for the mini cheesecakes, and it's also something that's really good with other things. Again, it's really good with yogurt, and it can be used with bread pudding or many other desserts. Caramelized means the sugar cooks and it starts to brown, and it makes a really lovely rich flavor. The only ingredients in this are apples, brown sugar, whipping cream, and that's it. Apples, brown sugar, oh, butter. Sorry, butter was the other one. What I've done is I've peeled the apples, cut them in half so the pieces won't be too big, and now I'm using this to cut them in wedges. I'm using gala apples. They hold their shape quite well. Some apples break down more than others when they're cooked, as you would know if you made applesauce or pies. And really it's just a matter of taste. It kind of looks nicer if the apples hold their shape in a dish like this, but other ones will be just as delicious. So now I'm going to bring these over to the stove top and we're going to start cooking. Put that on the hot part. 3 tablespoons of butter in this pan. You want to use a large enough pan that you can have the apples in pretty much a single layer. So I'll turn the heat on here. Melt the butter. And then I've pre-measured the brown sugar. The recipes for this will be posted online to go with the videos. The butter's melted now, and I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. Just stir that in, and we'll let it cook for about a minute. And what will happen is the sugar will start to melt. It'll become glossy instead of looking granular, and that's how you tell that it's starting to melt. It's starting to change already. And in a minute we're going to add the apples. I've used about a pound of apples. 4 medium-sized apples is around a pound. So if you don't have a kitchen scale to weigh them, that's how you can tell. If you've got extra big apples, you might want to use just 3. Okay, you see that's changed? Its consistency, it's nice and glossy now and not grainy. So I'm going to reach over and get these apple pieces that I prepared earlier. I'm going to stir these in. And they're going to get all coated with the brown sugar and butter mixture. And this part takes a little longer. It takes about 10 minutes. But what will happen is the apples will start to cook and they'll brown slightly. And the juices will be drawn out of the apples a little bit, and we'll just let that cook. Nice way to get the apple pieces coated. If you watch in a minute, you will see that the juices are already starting to be drawn out of the apples. And this brown sugary sauce is getting thinner. If you're a little impatient and turn the heat up, you have to watch it really closely because you don't want this to burn. The sauce is getting thinner. It will evaporate a little more and be absorbed into the apples a little more so that before you know it, there will be less sauce again. The apples are starting to get a little bit browned on the outside, but they will become more so as we go on. This takes about 10 minutes to cook altogether. And we're just at the beginning of that now. Now in the brown sugar and butter, and the sauce is bubbling as you can see, and it's thickening up a bit. The apples, as I pierce them with the fork, I feel that they are softening. We don't want them too mushy, but we want them nice and soft as a dessert dish. So the next step is to add whipping cream. I've got 1/3 cup or 75 mils of whipping cream. That's heavy cream. And I'm just going to stir that in. And it will thicken up and make a nice sauce with the other ingredients in just a few minutes. It's amazing to me how this happens, how things thicken with whipping cream. I'll just let that cook for a minute and move this aside. Our caramelized apples are just about ready to serve. We're going to turn the heat off. And just pour them into this nice dish to cool. The sauce will thicken up a little as it cools. You can make this a day in advance and keep it in the fridge overnight. I would suggest before serving it that you put it in the microwave or just warm it very slightly so it gets a nice gloss again. You don't want to serve it hot, especially when you're putting it on cheesecakes, but just warm it up ever so slightly so I guess it's so that the butter and the cream in it will soften again and get glossy. I'm going to make a cranberry-clementine sauce to serve with our mini cheesecakes. And to start with, I will turn the burner on and add 1/4 cup of water, just plain clear water. And I'm going to bring that to a boil and add a little bit of sugar to it. I'm going to add 3/4 cup of sugar. Cranberries are fairly tangy, so they need a bit more sugar than some fruits do. However, I find that the tastes are changing. I started with an old recipe for whole cranberry sauce when I was making this, and it called for a full cup of sugar, and I find that for modern tastes, 3/4 cup is just fine. Heat this up and it'll make sort of a syrup. And while it's heating, I'm going to add 4 cups of clementines. Now, it's around Christmas time and a lot of people have clementines at home. So you just peel the clementines and I cut them in quarters, in wedges, and then slice those up. So you've got pieces that aren't too big, but they're recognizable as clementines. This will come to the boil in a few minutes. And then what we're going to do is basically just what you would do to make a whole cranberry sauce, is to put the cranberries in the boiling sugar syrup and cook them until they pop. I always find it kind of ironic that a lot of people buy cranberry sauce when we grow cranberries in PEI and the sauce is so easy to make. So make your own, folks. Don't buy the cans. So I've washed the cranberries and picked them over, taken out any soft ones, and then because I washed them yesterday, I put them in a container with a bit of paper towel in the bottom to absorb the extra moisture to keep them nice and fresh. And of course refrigerated them. Now I'm just going to wait for this to come to a boil. Our sugar syrup with the clementines is just coming to a boil, so I'm going to add these 2 cups of fresh cranberries. You could, if you wanted to, use frozen cranberries in this as well. Either one will work just fine. Cranberries freeze beautifully. You just put them in the freezer as is. Now we're going to just let this come to a boil again. And when it is boiling, the cranberries are just going to start popping open. The skins on them will break. And then you'll get a nice red color to the sauce. And the flavor, it allows the cranberries to be sweetened by the sugar syrup too. Our cranberry clementine sauce is heating up and the cranberries have started to pop. You can see that the berries are bursting open. And we'll just let it cook a little longer, and then as it cools it will set up a bit. It'll become a little thicker and a little firmer. And the color of the clementines, they'll take on a pink color from the cranberries. They'll all look really nice. Oranges and cranberries are a really good flavor combination. I think many people have had a raw cranberry relish made with oranges. And so this is inspired by the recipes for whole cranberry sauce and the recipes for cranberry relish. And it's a really nice topping for our mini cheesecakes. It can also be used with yogurt. It can be used on pound cake as a nice topping. the uses are only limited by your imagination, really. So there we have it, cranberry clementine sauce.